Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Eliza Cava. Me llamo Elisa Cavas. I'm the Director of Conservation at Audubon Naturalist Society. Soy la directora de conservación de la Audubon Naturalist Society. And I'm here tonight to be the technology host. So the very first thing I'm going to do is say, if anyone needs to hear the conversation in Spanish, si alguien tiene que escuchar la conversación en español, por favor, if you need interpretation, you need to, in just a minute, I'm going to turn on this button. En un momentico, voy a empezar con este botón de interpretation con el globo. And when you push that, you'll be given the option to change to español. Cuando ese botón se aparece, lo van a dar una opción para usar español. So here we go. And our wonderful interpreters, Inés and Marisela, will be with you, live interpreting, simultaneous interpreting from English to Spanish. Inés y Marisela, mucho gusto, gracias. Okay. All right. So if you needed Spanish interpretation, si necesitan interpretación al español, ahora se pueden empujar ese botón de globo. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. This is our Hispanic Heritage Month Roundtable with Audubon Naturalist Society for our Naturally Latinos activities following our conference. We are in between our third and fourth Naturally Latinos conferences, and we will have some great news to share with you about our conference at the end of the evening. So stay tuned. Our wonderful, amazing panelists are going to introduce themselves. I will just give you a few more technical support pieces of information besides the interpretation and our mission and vision. So Audubon Naturalist Society inspires residents of the greater Washington, D.C. region to appreciate, understand, and protect their natural environment through outdoor experiences, education, and advocacy. And we seek to create a larger and more diverse community of people who treasure the natural world and work to preserve it. And that is why we're here today, to work on both our mission and our vision together with our panelists and with you. And we want to thank our sponsors for tonight, the U.S. Forest Service, who has made it possible for us to provide this wonderful programming for free. For participation, you can continue to chat with each other. Please do use the chat feature, but you also have access to the Q&A feature. And if you have a question for the panelists, we will spend the last part of the evening taking questions, and you can use the Q&A to put your questions into the list for Serenella, your moderator, to review. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, Serenella Linares, my amazing colleague and fellow co-chair of the Naturally Latinos Conference.
Thank you so much, Eliza. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It is a pleasure to introduce a dear friend that has been a really important part of the Puerto Rican culture here in the DMV area for the past, I want to say 20-something years, but I don't want to date him. So he is a book author, as well as a singer, composer, and a wonderful person altogether. His name is Edwin Maisonet, and he will be starting us with one of his compositions. Take it away, Edwin.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Serenella, por esas palabras y para ustedes un poema que le hice para la conferencia que se llama El gobierno no hizo nada. Con el azote del viento cambió toda nuestra vida. Nuestra isla preferida arrasó el golpe violento. Desapareció en un momento ya sin luz, toda apagada. Y la gente desdichada una a otra se ayudaba, pues la ayuda no llegaba. El gobierno no hizo nada. Tembló la tierra en Haití, en México, en Puerto Rico. La ciudad y el pueblo chico destruidos yo los vi. La gente está por ahí temerosa y desolada. Comida y techo les daba el prójimo en su momento. En Puerto Rico les cuento, El gobierno no hizo nada. Se desata una pandemia como nunca habíamos visto y aquel presidente listo no sabe que el tiempo apremia. Ahora es toda una epidemia y ya la suerte está echada. Mas la gente organizada se cuida y cuida de otros. Si es claro para nosotros, el gobierno no hizo nada. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Edwin. So with that reflection and using Puerto Rico as a reflection of what has been happening with our community, I want to introduce our panelists tonight. We have Brenda Perez Amador from the DOEE, Office of Urban Agriculture and Community Organizer, who was previously honored as an environmental champion in our Naturally Latinos Conference.
Hi everybody, ¿cómo están? Como me introdujo Serenela, mi nombre es Brenda Perez. My name is Brenda Perez, and I work for the Department of Energy and Environment with their Office of Urban Agriculture. And yeah, I'm also a community organizer here in DC. I started organizing for language justice in DC public high schools when I was 15 years old. Then I started to do immigration because I realized that, you know, being undocumented was going to have a big impact in my education. And now because of climate change, you know, I'm trying to integrate more conversations around really the intersection of immigration and the environment. So I feel like right now I'm at a point where like everything is fusing together into a really beautiful work. So I'm very happy.
Thank you. We also have with us Norberto Martinez, Executive Director of the Langley Park Civic Association and Hispanic Liaison in the Maryland court system. Hi, Norberto.
Okay. Buenas tardes, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. Yeah, Norberto Martinez, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here before everyone, and thank you, Serenela, y también al Naturally Latinos Conference por permitir este espacio. I thank you, and I'm here to answer questions and to talk to you more about the Langley Park Civic Association and some of the work that we are doing in Langley Park. Thank you.
Awesome. And I am Serenela Linares, co-chair of the Naturally Latinos Conference and director of adult programs at Audubon Naturalist Society. So Brenda, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and highlight the work that you've been doing for our Hispanic community?
Yeah, so I guess I can start with how I began organizing in the first place. And it was through language access, right? So when I came to the US, I didn't know how to speak English at all. And I was just thrown into the education system, into a DC public school system. And, you know, like teachers didn't really know what to do with me. We did have English as a second class, but you know, it only takes you so far. So I really had to fight for my education, and I knew that it was valuable for me to learn English. So I like really grasped onto my education and made sure that students like me had access to language justice in DC public schools. So in that space, I was able to organize with immigrant students from all over the world. Some of my closest friends now are from Cameroon, Ethiopia, Burma, Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and we also are organizing around language justice. Then when I was in high school, my senior year, I'm trying to like recollect the facts. Being undocumented really became really apparent into how it was going to play into the rest of my life, because I couldn't apply for FAFSA and I couldn't receive a lot of scholarships that were offered to many other students. So, and I was already in organizing mode, and I was like, this is not fair. Like, on top of not being given, you know, like language justice or language access services, you know, like now I have to fight for my education, or continue to fight for my education, but from an immigration point of view. So then I started organizing for immigration rights with an organization called Many Languages, One Voice. And I've been organizing ever since. I've been organizing with undocumented students all throughout DC to make sure that our work is highlighted and that people know that we're here. That eventually became regional work, where I was organizing with undocumented youth from Philadelphia, New York, and then it expanded to the national level, where I was organizing with undocumented students from California, Georgia, and all over the place. And now that I graduated college, and now that the next thing that I've seen that has been affecting really our community is climate change. And I've been integrating myself into the climate movement through my work. When I graduated from college, I graduated as a civil engineer, and it's harm to the environment. So I decided to go back to school to get a master's in water resources management. And that got me a job at the Office of Urban Agriculture at the Department of Energy and Environment. And there I'm really learning about urban agriculture and about how it affects our community, specifically the Latino community. And I was doing a quick research. So right now, one of the biggest things that affects our community, especially coming out of COVID, is food insecurity. And urban agriculture, the work that we're doing right now, we know that urban agriculture alone is not going to solve food insecurity, but it can be an opportunity to create jobs, to create social opportunities for people to have access to food. And there is this really cool study that the Capital Area Food Bank did around food insecurity. And pre-pandemic, food insecurity among Hispanic communities was about 16%. So 16% of Hispanic people said that they did not have, or they reported food insecurity. This was before the pandemic. After the pandemic, that number increased to 51%. So half of the Latino community in DC didn't have access to food. And that is just like a statistic that like shocks me every time. And I think, oh, sorry, my internet is a little bit unstable. So hopefully you guys are getting most of what I'm saying. I'll work on it. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm working with environmental leaders and opening up the conversation in the environmental work to talk about the impacts that climate change has on the health, the well-being, the mental health, the security of Latino communities. And this is a conversation that I'm having with many folks, yes, here in DC, but also at the national level. There is a really cool project that I'm doing with other young people around the intersection of many things, including immigration, environmental justice, civic engagement, mental health, and policing. And it's called the New Deal for Youth, where we're coming up with different demands that intersect all of those issues to demand, you know, the Biden administration to create more economic opportunities for young people. So that's some of the work. In summary, that's some of the work that I've been doing. I've also been advising a lot of folks who are interested in, or a lot of young people, specifically Hispanic, Latino communities who are interested in doing this work as an intersection with climate justice. There is this really cool organization called Hola Cultura, and they do journalism projects relating on issues that are related to the Hispanic community. And they just did a really cool project around the heat island effect and how it affects food vendors amongst other communities. So that's some of the work that I've been doing. And yeah, hopefully you guys got most of that.
We did. Thank you so much, Brenda. Norberto, would you like to tell us a bit of who you are and the work that you've been doing for our communities?
Sure. Norberto Martinez. I was born in Mexico, and to be precise, I was born in Oaxaca. I was in close contact with many of the Native American communities there. We are natives, many of us in Mexico, believe it or not, even though many of us are here, but we still have the native blood. So I grew up in Mexico. And when I came to the US, I obviously went to high school, college, and university. My major was in English literature. It was unusual to see Latinos in literature, but I was there. And then in regards to my work, I worked at the Central American Resource Center in San Francisco. There are 5 CARECENs, Central American Resource Centers, and I was an immigration paralegal there. After that, I came to DC, and in DC, I worked at the other CARECEN here. And then I also worked at the Spanish Catholic Center, mostly doing TPSs back then, 2001. If you remember, many Salvadorans were granted a TPS, a temporary protected status in the United States. And so I was helping doing the forms for them to get their work permits, and basically doing paralegal work as well in immigration law. After that, I worked at the mayor's office on Latino affairs here in DC, mostly on providing and assisting Latinos in DC, in the metropolitan area, mostly DC, obviously. After that, I worked with the Maryland SALI, which stands for the Sexual Assault Legal Institute, representing victims and survivors of sexual assault throughout the state of Maryland. And eventually I landed at the Circuit Court in Prince George's County, where I am right now. And in regards to the Langley Park Civic Association, we are basically a new organization. We have been working on a number of issues, but even before we were an organization, we had been working on some things about the environment, such as neighborhood cleanups events. Now they're called Growing Green with Pride. And it's an initiative that comes from the county executive. It's basically a neighborhood cleanup. We've been doing that for 10 years. Also cleaning the river. There is a little creek behind the Langley Park Community Center and behind the McCormick Elementary School, right in Langley Park. And we also have done some of the cleaning of the creek in that area. We have participated to a degree with the people who organize and the organizations that organize the Festival del Rio, which takes place in Bladensburg at the waterfront. We encourage many members in our community go to that event every year. It's actually in October as well. And then we have also been working with on some environmental trainings with Chispa, and you might know Ramon from Chispa, who's been doing some work in Langley Park, and so we've been doing some of that work. There are many things that we still want to do. And I could give you a list of many of the things that we want to do. Some of the things we have tried before is to create community gardens. We haven't had a chance, we haven't been successful at it. We also wanted to create a program or participate in a tree planting program and bring the Japanese trees into the area, the cherry blossom trees. They're beautiful when they blossom, and we want those also in Langley Park. Why not? Langley Park is beautiful. We have to be proud of our neighborhoods. And that's one way to do it, to bring trees, to bring more appreciation to our environment, to our trees, get to know the environment. Right at the creek, if you walk by it, you probably won't learn much because there are no signs, there are nothing to read on about the actual animals and trees and plants that actually live in that environment. So we want that. We want to know. We want to know who we are sharing the natural environment with, and that is our trees, our plants, our animals, all that stuff. And they're just a few things, but I have more on my list to share later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norberto. It's really an honor to know that there are people like our panelists dedicated to helping further our communities and help them grow, especially in these particular times that are so challenging. And we have seen a number of crises that have affected everyone, but have also brought and highlighted some inequalities that exist between the responses that the general population experiences versus what our Latino community experience. Brenda, could you please tell us a little bit on what challenges have you seen our community go through in these particular times?
Yeah, so I don't even know where to begin. And you know, like, also I get so emotional sometimes about like talking about like the impact. So if my voice starts cracking a little bit, mil disculpas. But yeah, during the pandemic, some of the disparities that we saw come out of the pandemic were new. Like, these are things that have been happening even before the pandemic, and the pandemic just like exacerbated everything, right? It just made everything, you know, like way worse. And not just the pandemic, you know, but Edwin in his poem, you know, he shared, you know, some of the natural disasters that have been happening in our countries, you know, the earthquake in Haiti, hurricanes, mudslides, and so many things that impact, you know, and it's kind of hard to visualize, right? But people forget to, or people need to understand that whatever happens in our home countries, like, impacts us here, you know, because we are still so connected to our families over there. And immigration, you know, the way that it works, you know, like anytime something happens in another country, you know, like you have refugees who come to look for safe places to be because their country is no longer a space where they can be because of these challenges. So, but here in DC, some of the things that got exacerbated was access to medical services, right? So here, a lot of the folks that work in DC, in the Latino community, a lot of their jobs predominantly fall in the restaurant business, right? So once the pandemic hit, like, we could no longer be indoors. And so a lot of folks lost their jobs. A lot of folks are still undocumented, and they don't have access to language services. So here in DC, a lot of undocumented people can apply for health insurance, but if you don't know how that system works, or if nobody's helping you like navigate that process, then it can also be very difficult. There are folks who don't know how to use computers, and we couldn't go in person. So it became really difficult. So we saw that a lot of folks needed access to mental and physical health services for their health. Mayor Bowser, you know, she said, you guys have to go outside. You guys have to get your exercise. You guys have to take care of your mental health. But in a place like Columbia Heights, you know, like, all of those green spaces are so heavily dominated by white folks, you know, to the point where our communities no longer feel safe. So we also saw that. Language access also. One of the things that I noticed on the COVID website that DC put out, and I was checking it every day, because in a pandemic, the most important thing is to have access to information. And as soon as something happens, like, people should be able to have access to that, because in a pandemic or in a natural disaster, that becomes really vital. That becomes the difference between surviving it or not making it. So the coronavirus website information, a lot of that information didn't get translated into Spanish or other languages until after 2 weeks. So it was like on average, like a 2-week window that people had to wait in order to get that information. Same with the registration to get vaccinated. That registration also didn't get translated until about like a week and a half. And that's a long time to wait when you're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. So those are some of the things that were exacerbated by all of this. Yeah, but like not to be like so gloomy, but in response, our communities, we really organize ourselves. One of the really beautiful things about, being undocumented is that wherever you go, you will find your people and you will find a network of folks who will support you. And that also got exacerbated. Folks, neighbors to neighbors were really helping out each other. There is this really cool group of señoras that I got to work with who lost their jobs in the restaurant business. And they started to organize themselves, asking for the mayor or for the federal government to not exclude them from the stimulus checks. That's another thing. A lot of the folks that, if you were undocumented, then you didn't have access to that stimulus check. So that group of señoras really got to organize themselves. And from those conversations, we got to learn more in depth of like, what were some of the things that they were, some of the challenges that they were facing that I didn't even think about. So those were some of the things that got exacerbated. And again, these are things that are not new. These are things that I have been fighting for ever since I got to this country. Language access, services for immigrant communities, access to food services, access to information, safe communities for our communities to not get targeted. These are not new things that we've experienced. These were here before, and the pandemic made us even realize that these problems are still here, and we need to come up with solutions. And together, not just continue to organize, but really demand government and other agencies with resources to make sure that they're able to take care of us, because there is like so much that we can do, but if we don't have access to resources, then it becomes really difficult. So those are some of the things that I've seen, or that's how I've seen the community, the Latino community specifically, get impacted in the past year and a half.
Thank you, Brenda. Norberto, same goes to you. What are some of the challenges that the Latino community around you has faced, and how those challenges contrast with the rest of the population?
Sure. In Langley Park specifically, what I can tell you is at the beginning of the pandemic, we got into finding out exactly what the problems were. What were they facing? What were the basic needs or the most urgent needs for residents in Langley Park? So one of the major needs was basically at the beginning was, food. So we joined many of the food distribution sites and places in Langley Park. I was part of that. And then we also created a fundraising through GoFundMe to raise funds to provide incentives, financial incentives and support to many families in Langley Park. So we created that. We gave money away, which was to a degree, it was rental assistance. So we gave we provided financial assistance right away to many residents in Langley Park. We also provided, later on, we provided some, we discover that many people continue to have food needs, and also obviously to celebrate Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was coming in November. And then so we created food baskets. Well, they were actually bags, but we created an event where we could provide food for many of our residents to have something to eat for Thanksgiving. We also created a an event where we provided toys to children in Langley Park. Many of our families are new to the area. And I'm sure many of you have probably heard about the caravanas that have been coming from our sister and brother countries down in Central America. And so we want to make sure that they also get some assistance once they get here. And so that's what we created. The needs are endless, and I think they've always been there. Langley Park really has been neglected, and there's no library in Langley Park. There is not a high school there. There is no middle school there. There really lacks many services, and so we have been able to create meetings with many leaders in the government and nonprofit sector that we refer to as it's like a network. Network provides services pretty much, and we meet every month. And then whenever there are needs, we bring them up to many of our service providers. So we continue those meetings. We have been doing those meetings for the last 4 years, probably more actually. And so we try to fill in the gaps. In the past, when we used to meet in person, actually many residents would come to our meetings and tell us that there is a need for a guard to help cross children when they go to school and also come back from school. And so we basically we would ask the county executive to provide a guard, and so that's how things were done, and that's how we try to address issues directly to the needs of the people, because we can really be playing around. It's the safety of our family, the safety of many of the children, many of the women who take their children to school, and so we want also a safe environment. We haven't really explored the environmental racism that hits us as Latinos, as Latin Americans in many parts in the area. So there are really no studies, but I wish there would be more focus to our environments, our neighborhoods, such as the air quality that we're breathing. There is a high asthma rate in many of our communities. We want to know why, and it's not a mistake or some weakness of our families. It just has to do with the quality of our air, the air pollution that we're breathing constantly in many areas. We also need to provide studies of the water quality. What kind of water are we getting from the county? Is it safe? Is it healthy? Is it clean? Or not? We want to know. This has happened in other states where dirty water has been having a serious effect on people's health in many parts in the United States. So we want to know in Langley Park, what is the quality of our water, of our public water? Or what is the quality of our air pollution, or the air free from pollution, right? Also, other basic things. I think in Langley Park, there are no trash cans almost in the corners. I think every corner should have a trash can, should have a recycling can, and it should have an organic matter can where we can just deposit the peel from the banana in the organic matter. We can reuse it. I just frankly don't understand. This is basic stuff, and we don't have it. So in order for us to really encourage our community to have that culture of putting the trash where it belongs, we need trash cans. We need recycling cans. And so I think that there's so many needs that we need in terms of the environment. We need bike lanes. We need trails for people to walk. All this stuff contributes to the health and the well-being of our communities. We frankly haven't had luck with that. The University of Maryland sits right next to us, yet it doesn't serve our community. They don't offer not even English as a second language courses, no environmental courses for our communities are right there, a few steps from the University of Maryland, yet we have no access to that university, none from our community. And so those are basic needs. I think the university should open up some of us educational system for us who live there, who are there in Langley Park, right? We want to know how to grow our own milpa, our own elotes, our own ejotes. Then the University of Maryland can help us with that. We want to create a community garden. The University of Maryland can help us that. You want to learn about the environmental injustice in our communities. The university is right there. It's a huge educational institution, yet there's almost no Langley Park residents in that university. Even Native American studies, none. There are many Guatemalans who are Mayan speakers in Langley Park, yet there's nothing in the University of Maryland for us. Our county executive should have people who look like us, who speak like us, who want a better environment for us, be represented in the county executive, in the county council, in the school board. All that stuff is great. Chispa did a lot of an amazing work with many residents in the area, where we created buses that are non-polluting, electric buses to take children to school, instead of those old buses that used to pollute the environment and the air quality in our areas. We don't want that. We want better than that. We deserve better than that. And that's part of our work. I think it's part of our commitment to continue to bring those issues forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norberto, for those very passionate words. I really appreciate them. And I hope that some of our audience is listening and in a place to help build the community at Langley Park. So that brings us to, given all these challenges that we have been seeing highlighted throughout this time, what models of success did you see rise up from those challenges that you can share with us tonight? And I think I want to start with you, Norberto.
I think there is a great, we have been working with our Latino communities in Langley Park. And I know many members in our community are, I would say, hungry to get organized, hungry to get things done, hungry to really do things because they live there. It's only natural to see that they want to be organized and working in benefit of each other. Community gardens, we weren't successful, but people were asking, are we getting a community garden? What land can we use? When can we start? How can we start that? Do we have the knowledge to start planting beans and corn and squash? Many of our communities do have that knowledge, but we don't have the land. We don't have the water. And so we have been successful in creating that hope for many of our communities, that if we keep organizing, if we keep asking, if we keep telling the county that we need not only the services, but we also want to appreciate our environment by having more trees, by having more plants, by getting to know our creek, making sure that many members of our community do not go fishing in that creek because that creek is not healthy and it's not safe. It's polluted. Yet, when we walk through that creek, many members of our community are fishing there. And so we can do it. It's just a matter of political will in the government and political will in our community. Our community is, I would say, one successful event that I can tell you is, for instance, our neighborhood cleaning events. Many members, we get 30, 40 people to come and clean the area every spring and every fall. And if we can do that with tree planting, I'm sure people would come out. There are trees available in the county. I don't know exactly what the Office of Environmental Services does in the county. But it's like pulling teeth when we actually have to do something. And I think we need more than that. We need bilingual staff there so they can help us and guide us, not only through the process and getting grants if possible, but just to get the trees planted in the public lands and also planted in private homes. There are many residents who would love a tree. I would like, this is one thing that I was working on, and is to get cherry blossom trees around. There is a street that goes in a loop, and there's a lot of space there. It would look beautiful in Langley Park, and that's something we have to advocate for. Our community has advocated, but again, we have very little representation in those spheres of the government locally, and so, but we just have to keep going and asking and saying, this is what we need, this is what we want, and even in our languages, we have to do it, and so that's what I tell you. I think if we organize around issues, we can be very successful. It's just difficult if we know we're facing a wall. We're not going to be able to get around that wall. We're not going to be able to get through it, and we're not going to be able to be listened to. And that's what sometimes we feel that we face locally. Thank you.
Thank you. So Brenda, what models of success could you share with our community?
Yeah, so also thank you, Norberto, for your answers. I'm like, yes, like we need to continue organizing, and we need to continue to demand for the resources that we deserve. So some of the models that I've seen, and I think I started to touch a little bit on the last question, but I got to work with this really cool group of señoras that were previously restaurant workers, but then they got fired because of the pandemic. I really got to work with them, and through their work, I really got to explore the intersectionality between health, access to green spaces, immigration, language justice, and organizing. And that was really beautiful. I'm gonna share the link so that you guys can see some of the pictures. It was through an organization called Movement Matters. We were able to meet in person, and the only reason why we were able to meet in person is because of the way that Puerto Rican communities are organizing in the island. And Puerto Rico, they have such an incredible way to respond to disasters. They got it down. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to connect with Puerto Rican organizers, and they really gave us a guideline of like, how do we organize with our communities while we're still in the pandemic? And they gave us safety procedures. They gave us exercises and some best practices. So we were really able to learn from them. So again, like we're really learning from each other. During the pandemic, another thing that we saw was, this big like cry for, to make sure that Black lives are protected, right? And that created so many more intersections for me. One of the really cool things that Black Lives Matter National did was that they included a section for immigration specifically, and they're demanding that ICE, gets completely abolished, and that's not such a crazy thing to think about, because before 9/11, ICE didn't exist. So we can definitely live in a world where ICE doesn't continue to exist. But I saw that, and also with the environmental movement with indigenous communities, I've been having the pleasure to work alongside so many young people that are not just Latinos, And, you know, not to sound naive or anything, right? But when I started organizing, I really started organizing with this lens of multiculturality and organizing in multilingual spaces. So for me too, and you know, like in the immigration movement is so dominant, or like we can, in many movements, we can be like so single issue sometimes. But in the past year, you know, like we have been really coming together to come up with solutions that are really intersectional. So when it comes to, you know, like immigration, you know, like we can't talk about immigration without talking about police brutality and without talking about the effects of climate change and how it impacts our home countries. You know, we can't talk about water rights without talking the missing and murdered indigenous woman and the missing and murdered indigenous woman of Mexico, you know, and that in Mexico, we call it ni una más, not one more. And yeah, we can't talk about, you know, like access to green spaces or mental health without talking about language justice. So our communities are realizing more and more and more like how much we need each other. And like there's this really beautiful organizer here in DC. She's like the mom organizer of all the young people here in DC, Ana Rondon. She's like a strong Afro-Dominicana, you know, woman who fights for students' rights. And I know her because I saw her fight for my elementary school when I was 11 years old, and she's still organizing. And one of the things that I've always hear her say is, you are my community and I need you to survive. And every year as I grow as an organizer, I continue to feel that even more and more. I'm like, we really do need each other. We need to uplift one another. And that's one of the really beautiful things that I see come out of this this pandemic, right? And out of any struggle, we're really coming together. There is also this, again, there is also this really cool project that I'm doing at the national level, where I'm working with 33 other young people around the intersection or around like economic opportunities, around economic justice, healing and well-being, safe communities, environmental justice, immigration, and democracy and civic engagement. So that's a really cool project to follow. And again, you know, like really intersectional conversations and really learning from one another and putting our resources together to create change. Here in DC specifically, one of the things that came out of the pandemic, or, you know, like there were a lot of like many bad things, but one way in which our communities really organized was through the DC Mutual Aid Network. And this did not rely on government resources or on institutions or on money. It relied on one another. And it was like really like a true like neighbor to neighbor solidarity of, I have this and I can see that you need this, so let me give it to you. Let's support one another. So that's one of the things that I've seen. Thank you for sharing that really beautiful quote by Ana Rondon. You know, and you guys are my community, you know, and we do need each other to survive. And again, like I really feel that I cannot do this alone. Like we cannot do this alone. Like if, you know, like the pandemic taught us anything, is that we need each other. We need to share resources. We need to see like strategize with one another. What is it that is working in your community that you think, you know, you should teach to other communities? And let's, you know, build multilingual and multi-ethnic spaces, you know, like one of the strategies of the, you know, the oppressor, you know, is to divide and conquer, right? So it is intentional that, you know, we are fighting for resources. It is intentional that our communities are not organizing together because we've been taught to do that. But, you know, like in order to like really create solution, to like really put pressure on the institutions that can really create change, like we really need to come together. And again, that's one of the really cool things that I've seen. And not just like talking here in the US, but like really learning from each other, like internationally, right? So a lot of there's like so many cool things that have come out of Puerto Rico alone. that I've seen being implemented in DC, and things ranging from community health to the way that we respond to an emergency, like a natural or health emergency. And that's really cool. So those are some of the things, the mutual aid network, and like really this like intersectionality between our communities that has been really beautiful to see and to be a part of. And like one more thing that I'll share, like in organizing with other communities, there is a lot of learning that we also have to do, right? So we have been growing, like some of us, like haven't been able to organize with other communities because of, like for me, like internalized, like internalized anti-Blackness, right? So, like another thing that this movement has taught me is that we have to continue to grow as individuals, and learning is ugly and it's not gonna look pretty, and people are gonna call you out, but you gotta take it and you gotta work on yourself and be like, okay, like what is it that I need to work on? How can I regrow? How can I continue to uplift other communities? How can I take up space and how can I give up space? So all of these things, the young environmental movement right now, like it's like such a cool example of that, where they're like really putting up the front indigenous communities, indigenous young people specifically. So those are some of the things that I've seen. In our pre-conversation before this, we were talking about like how we're always like so, like responding to disasters, responding to emergencies, and how especially, in our communities is always like resilience, 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 but there is also a lot of joy, a lot to celebrate. I've been reading some really cool articles and I've been watching some really cool videos about like all of the music and culture and art that comes out of hard times. And that's really beautiful. And like we should continue to celebrate that. We should continue to celebrate each other and the culture that we have and continue to build with one another. So again, those are a very, very few of the things that I've seen our community do and the very beautiful ways in which we are responding to all of this and the beautiful ways in which we are helping one another.
Thank you, Brenda. We have one of our panelists, Pedro Cruz from the Sierra Club, is joining us via phone. Thank you so much, Pedro, for being with us. Could you please introduce yourself and the work that you've been doing for our community?
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this event. And I'm sorry that I'm late. And actually, I'm Pedro Cruz. I'm the acting director for the Healthy Communities campaign with Sierra Club. I'm based out of the Washington, D.C. office, but right now I'm calling from Detroit, where we have a EJ tour, some of the facilities in the city, and it's something that it reminds me why we're doing the work that we're doing. The Healthy Community Campaign do works in Detroit, Puerto Rico, Louisiana, Texas, and other parts of the country, and we're trying to address EJ issue. And we are very intentional when we say that the focus of our campaign is to work with Black and Latino families, because there is a lot of language that we use, not to talk directly, mentioning the people that are affected for the problem that we need to resolve. But thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me despite me being late.
No problem, Pedro. We are very pleased that you were able to make it. Thank you. So our final question to our panelists is one of very much important. And it is, what can the organizations in this area can do to help you? And how can we make sure that we are not just being resilient, but also growing the community for its own sake? Brenda, let's start with you.
Yeah, so one of the most critical ways in which agencies, organizations, or if you have access to anybody that has resources is funding, right? I love unrestricted funding. We can no longer rely on the way that grants are put out there, right? Some agencies, including the one that I work for, the Department of Energy and Environment, we think we know the problem and we think we know what the solution is. So when we put out funding, like it's always so specific, right? And I'm just like, this is not gonna, like Norberto said, like University of Maryland is right there, yet they're not doing any studies on specifically how the Hispanic community is being impacted by either water quality or air quality. So if you have access to anybody that has funding, tell them to give us unrestricted funding and to really listen to the community, really listen and follow their leadership. Communities of color are the ones that are first and foremost impacted by climate issues. And they are the experts on how these issues can be alleviated, how they can be solved. So we really need to start investing in our communities. And that really means unrestricted funding. It's so funny because at the Department of Energy and Environment, and to hold us accountable, right? Like we put out this equity framing one day, and it was great to hear that we have equity definitions, that we have an equitable mission statement, that we know what environmental justice is. But I specifically work on grants, right? So the conversations that I'm having with the folks that work on grants are very different than we're talking about equity. It's like, it feels like I just went back in time like a decade and like now I have to reteach everybody, like what does equity mean? So another thing that I like to tell people, it's like, don't tell me about your mission statement, like show me your budget. Show me where you're putting your money, Is it going to communities or are you just like investing, in the communities that you have been investing in the last years or for your whole existence? There is this really cool organization that I get to work for, the Diversity Fund, and they have some really cool resources on how to make, and they're specifically talking to family foundations and philanthropy. These are resources around how they can change their funding structure so that it puts communities it frames communities as the experts on the issues that they're trying to solve. And they specifically focus on, or some of the issues that they have been focusing on are racial equity, policing, immigration, language justice, and environmental issues. So yeah, that's one of the things, funding and unrestricted funding specifically.
Very good. It's incredible what we can do when we're allowed to step out of the box and implement our own solutions, right? Norberto, same to you. How can we grow our community for its own sake, and how the organizations that are listening can help you?
There are many things that can be done. I first have to say that the Naturally Latino Conference is one way. Conferences are always good, not only in English, in Spanish, in Maya, many of the Mayan languages that are in Langley Park, or other native languages in our communities. That's one thing. Funding obviously is necessary, I think. And the other is help create local organizations where our communities there are many deserts of organizing our communities, meaning that many parents are to a degree organized, but they have no organization. None nationally, none locally. There is really nothing. So in that way, they cannot be helped navigate many of the obstacles that they face in local government or with agencies, such as including community-based organizations. And so those are good things. Other things that I say would be workshops. Learn about we have to learn ourselves about our own air quality. It's good if we get workshops and trainings and all that, but we should be creating knowledge within our own communities. We have to be planting that seed in every single member of our community or members in our community in order for us have the knowledge and expertise to advocate for our own environmental needs and whatever that we believe needs to be fixed or needs to be addressed. And so that will create an independent community, meaning we can navigate through many of the issues on our own, and really we don't need someone to come from the outside, out of our own planet, to come and help us. We can do that ourselves, but we need sometimes some of the tools. And in order for us to have those tools, that knowledge, that training, we need precisely someone to guide many members in our community. Is the other, I think, in order for us to appreciate that environment, that natural environment, to live in harmony with our environment, we need to appreciate it, we need to know it, we need to be in that environment. We're not getting that. We still see snakes as a dangerous beast. We still see skunks like a dangerous animal. It's not. It's part of our natural environment. We have to learn to appreciate it, to love it, right? And so we shouldn't be exterminating those animals just because they're out there. It might harm us, but really, in one way would be to get to know our environment. Like I said at the beginning, I mentioned that we need reading signs. When you go to a lake somewhere that belongs to the government, they usually have signs that tell you about the animals and the plants and the what lives in that natural environment, that lake, right? For instance, we need to have that in our neighborhoods. Why can't we have that? Right? We need to know what tree we're looking at when we see the rain coming like crazy, and then we run for cover, or when the sun is really strong, because we get heat waves in DC and the whole metro area, including Langley Park. Yet we run for shade, and we don't even know what tree is providing us with that shade. So we need to learn about those things. And so I have to say that, I thank you, thank the Naturally Latinos Conference for giving me this platform and this space to really air some of our issues and some of our concerns. And I thank you very much, and I hope many members in our community really take it seriously to organize themselves, even if it's 3, even if it's 4. And then reach out to many of us, to me or to Brenda or to Serenella, for instance, or other organizations that might lend their hand to support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norberto. So really, we need funds and we need to empower our community by sharing the tools. Pedro, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
All right. So can you share with us 1 or 2 examples on how we can grow our community from your perspective?
I would take it exactly where Norberto left it. It's not just about organizing, but also taking ownership of the organizing spaces. Sometimes organizing spaces, especially in the environmental work and the conservation work, are not the most welcoming spaces for Latinos, despite us getting so much, at least it's something that we inherited from our abuelitas, that respect to the land. Um, and I noticed in many of the spaces that we are like we are guests, like we were invited, not that we own those spaces, politically speaking. And I think what advice is number one is for Latino community members to be involved, and second, to take ownership of those spaces. There is a perception that in the conservation movement that is mostly white. I have a problem with that. I think that is more diverse than it looks like. The thing is that we Latino, we don't speak out. We don't make ourselves feel like we have a presence there. And we should speak out and we should show what we bring into the table from the beginning, because we have knowledge that we should be sharing.
Thank you so much. To our audience, I want to remind you that we are going to be using the Q&A section here on Zoom. The icon is on the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a Q&A label on it. So while I read the questions that you all have been submitting, thank you for doing that. Please feel free to add to the ones that we've received. So from anonymous attendee, how can we help our youth to be more involved, to make sure that they know they have a voice, and also to know how they can help in community events? Anyone can take it? I thought so, Brenda.
Oh my God, any youth question? I'm like, yes, like I've been doing youth organizing for a very long time. I guess my greatest advice, and this is for like everybody, because everybody has, like a young person in their community. And some of us are young, right? And should be getting more involved. But really like offer yourself as a mentor, right? So, as a young person, like I remember when I started doing community organizing when I was 15, I was so scared, my mom was like, don't do this, like telling me like the worst, like case scenarios. And also, like I was a young person, like all of my world was school and my friends. It wasn't until somebody was like, oh, let me tell you about these organizations, or somebody like actually sat down with me and like listened to my story, and they were like, you know what, like I think you would like actually enjoy this space that I'm part of. And that was my introduction to a community organizing space. But really offer yourself as a mentor. Like all of you guys have seen and have like really cool experiences, and you guys should offer that to young people. There is this really cool organization, City Blossoms, and they have a youth group called Mighty Greens. And Mighty Greens is a youth entrepreneurship cooperative, and it's young students who are doing gardening, and they are also selling their products from the stuff that they grow in the garden. I'm gonna share the link real quick. And so I'm also part of the planning committee for the Naturally Latinos Summit. And that's one of the groups that I want to bring in. So I connected with the organizer, who's also my really good friend, Lauren, and her contact is in that link, so you guys can hit her up. And I told her, like I would really love to have some of the youth there. And I was like, and also I want to be their mentor. I know that it can be really scary to speak in public, and I can train them because I have experience in that. And I can introduce them and guide them and hold their hand all the way until when the conference happens in March. So also, yes, they're also recruiting a new executive director. So if you guys love gardens and have director's experience, you guys should definitely apply. But yeah, I really offer myself because again, it can be really scary, like the world is so huge, and young people are young people. And if you can offer your or instead of, like something that I always tell my mom, like instead of telling me like where to go, like why don't you invite me? Let's go together. If there is a really cool event that they think they should join, like go with them. Listen to their story, empower them. Like you're the first person that can do that for them, because somebody did it for me. And I love my mentors. I have one mentor that I've known since I was 15, and I'm just like always looking out to her, like always asking her my questions. So I'm like, I have so many, I'm still very new to this, but yeah, so really be there for them, offer yourselves and ask them, like, how do you want to get involved? How can I help you?
Wonderful. Thank you, Brenda. From an anonymous attendee, and I'm going to do a unheard of thing, but I'm going to answer this one myself. Any advice on how to diversify the sustainability field? How can we push these kinds of jobs to the youth? I was previously the school programs manager here at Audubon. And one of the things that I was constantly called for was to go to the career days at schools in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and DC. It is there where you can plant the seed on these youth minds that these are possible, because we don't know what we don't know. But if they see that this is an alternative, that it's a job that they can earn good money doing it, and by the way, you are helping the environment as well, it's a wonderful thing. You'll be helping open their minds and open their options. It's really important that we take every opportunity that is given to share that these jobs within the environmental community exist and that they are for all. It also helps that if in your organization you have people that look like the community you want to serve, when you have someone that is in front of an audience, that the audience can see themselves on them, I cannot tell you how powerful it is when I see a young Latina girl looking at me, knowing that I'm a scientist, and they can go, oh my God, I can be a scientist too. If she can do it, I can do it too. So make sure that you are advertising as wide as possible. If you're advertising and you don't get who you want, you're not advertising on the right place. So advertise wide, do the work of really looking for every place where you can find, and go to the schools, volunteer for career days so you can open young minds. I have another question. How can we bring the ancestral knowledge that Latino communities already have into climate change and resilience planning? Who would like to take that? Go ahead, Norberto.
I mentioned that many members in our community in Langley Park are Mayan. I am very sure that many of our Native Americans have had so much knowledge of our environment, because for years they have lived taking care of the planet. They did not overdid it with fishing or cutting trees or plants or killing animals. And so that's something we need to explore, and that's something that we need to really look into. And a lot of that knowledge has been passed on to many of our communities, many members in our community. We need to take advantage of that. We need to explore that, and we need to sort of mine it, sort of in quotes, so that it is spread throughout not only the rest of the community, but to our younger generations. They need to carry that torch into the future. The planet is a critical stage right now. I believe that many of the natural disasters are not some sort of crazy thing that's happening. Is actually because we have been destroying the planet. The destruction in Puerto Rico, for instance, or the flooding in New York, the flooding in India, the drought in Central America or Northern Mexico. Those are because we have been abusing our environment. We are digging for minerals and leaving those holes in there. That's not healthy. That's not something we should be doing. Leave it in the ground. If it was there, it should be there. That, you know, if we and so that is something we need to look into. There are many members that are from Native American communities that have been coming from south of the United States, and there are many members also of our Native American community, brothers and sisters, who have lived here from generations, many, and so we need to embrace them, and we need to join hands with them so that they also can help us. They have lived here much longer than we have, and they have the knowledge for many centuries that we need to make sure that we plant the seeds in many of our young communities and many young members. That's one thing. The other thing is that we need to urge the schools to put that in the curriculum. Put in the curriculum environmental studies at an early age, so that we learn to respect our Mother Earth, we learn to respect our Pachamama, and that we learn to love our trees and our rivers and our creeks and our water and everything else that is around us. The curriculum should have it. But if we, as Latinos, don't have the right to vote in local elections for county executive or county council or school board, obviously that's ignored. And that is part of the representation that we need, part of the voice that we need locally, and that is something we need to advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we run out of time for Q&A. I will send these answers to the remaining questions via email to the participants. And right now, I want to say that I want to share why we are here tonight. It is our mission at Audubon to serve all of our population in the greater DMV area. And a very important portion of our population is the Latino community. There are, as you have seen tonight, many voices, many powerful voices, and many wonderful people that are Latinos that are fighting for the environment and often don't receive the highlight that they deserve. With these platforms, we want to share the spotlight. We want to share how our people are working tirelessly to make sure that we have a better place and that we have the representation that we deserve in all the branches of the environmental movement. So thank you for being with us. And right now, I would like to cede the floor to Edwin so he can close our intention tonight.
I want to dedicate this last poem titled Un Nuevo Amanecer to all the wonderful panelists, Brenda, Norberto, Pedro, Serenela, for all the wonderful work that you guys are doing out there for the community, and to everyone else out there that is working hard for the Latino community. Para ustedes, for you, un nuevo amanecer. Desolados, abatidos por pandemias, huracanes, terremotos y volcanes, gritamos sin ser oídos. Mas estamos decididos, no vamos a perecer. Aunque tengamos que hacer lo que no hace el gobierno, tornaremos cada infierno en un nuevo amanecer. Brindando la mano amiga al que está necesitado, demandando del Estado que la ayuda justa siga, Que Diosito los bendiga por su amor y por querer. Pues juntos vamos a ver un nuevo mundo y mejor. Brilla el sol con su calor en un nuevo amanecer. Que todo lo que se ha hecho se comparta y se fomente. Se lo merece la gente y le sacarán provecho. Que el amor que hay en tu pecho y de tu mente, el saber, nos traigan un renacer de salud y bienestar para reír y cantar en un nuevo amanecer. Thank you very much to everybody.
Muchísimas gracias, Edwin. Y muchísimas gracias a nuestros panelistas en la noche de hoy. Eliza, take us home. ¿Estás muda?
Siempre. Okay. Thank you so much, Serenela. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Norberto. Thank you, Brenda. And thank you, Pedro, for joining us from Detroit on the phone. We're very happy to have you. And a big thank you to Maricela and to Ines, our wonderful interpreters. If you are listening through the Canal de Español, you're listening to them, and we really thank them. They've been incredible partners with us. So, and one thing I want to just acknowledge is that I meant to, at the beginning, share with you, we've talked a lot about indigenous communities of Latin America and Central America. We should remember also that we are on indigenous land as well, the historic land of the Nacotchtank and the Piscataway peoples who are very much with us and have a lot to say for and about themselves, of course. So, and we thank you all for being with us. And Serenela and I have an announcement that we want to share with you, and we are so excited. So, save the date. Naturally Latinos 4. Otro mundo es posible. Another world is possible. And Brenda Perez is on our planning committee, and she actually came up with that theme tagline. Thank you, Brenda. And we actually have several other committee members who are here tonight. It's hard for me to look at you, so I can't call you out directly, but you are welcome to announce yourselves in the chat. Thank you for being on our planning committee. Thank you for participating in past conferences to everyone who has. Save these dates. It will be hybrid. We are hoping for several days of virtual, one day in person together, and some outdoor activities. So save the dates. And because you're here tonight, you will receive the registration link as soon as it is available. It's not available yet, but everyone on this list tonight will definitely get it as soon as it's available. And we will hope you'll get your early bird ticket or your student or your scholarship ticket and join us. So thank you again. Thank you to my wonderful conference co-chair and tonight's host, Serenela, and to our panelists again. Buenas noches a todos.
Buenas noches.
Muchísimas gracias. Buenas noches.